horror fans, welcome back to Room 237, back with another review. As I continue my kind of marathon of the more extreme horror, more extreme films. And I guess this is one that I've seen pop up on some people's extreme collection or extreme list. It is part of the new wave of French extremity, which was a group of films, I think some outside of horror, but in the early to mid 2000s that were more violent, more graphic, but I think had more weight in the writing and like the psychological and emotional level of horror. Films like High Tension, Inside, Martyrs, ones like that. This is considered part of that wave. It is a film I've known about for well over a decade. I've just never got around to getting it or seeing it. I found it for less than $10, so I figured I'd pick it up. As I said, it is the French film. It is 2007's Frontiers. Frontiers. See, this is how I feel when people use parentheses in comments. They'll use it as part of the sentence. Like, I really like your review of this movie. Like, is it needed? I'm sure there's a reason for that, but... So, yeah, this is written and directed by Xavier Gens, who before this directed the Timothy Oliphant version of Hitman. He did a segment on ABCs of Death, this, and a few other films. And it stars, I can't even read the names on that. Katrina Testa, Aurélien Week, Samuel Le Bihan, Estelle Lefebvre, if I'm pronouncing any of these correctly. Maud Forget, I'm guessing I'm butchering all these names. Who I do want to point her out. She plays Eva, who's on the cover here, and I think she was in a lot of the marketing, but she's not the main character. She was probably the strongest actress in this whole film. She's the one I really felt for the most. And she kind of reminded me of, his last name is Dorfman, the kid from The Ring and the Chainsaw Massacre remake. She kind of looks like him with just these crazy, wide, like penetrating eyes. I thought she was really good. And yeah, Laurent Bears did the cinematography. Carlo Rizzo was the editor. Jean-Pierre Taeb, if I pronounce that correctly, did the music. The music was commendable as well. Very, swelling, dramatic. At times, other times very, like, somber, a melancholic music that really fit. And yes, as you can see, this was part of After Dark's Horror Fest. But I believe this was the one that they could not show. To my understanding, this is kind of like what Imprint was to Masters of Horror, banned and unable to show. This was one that they couldn't show, or one that they couldn't get away with showing, or whatever it was. The movie we weren't allowed to show in Horror Fest. And I guess it got an NC-17 rating initially. I'm guessing it's just because of the violence. But in all honesty, yeah, it's gorier, sure, than something like Martyrs. But maybe a little gorier than some of the Saw films, and definitely Hostel. But I would say it's as violent as Martyrs. I mean, even with like just the beatings, and it does say the French answer to Hostel and Saw. There's really not a whole lot of torture. There's only a couple torture scenes. But where it's like Saw would be not so much the cinematography, but the lighting. Like how Saw has those super intense greens and blues. Almost every shot outside is this hellacious blue filter. Which, yes, I did think it looked cool. It does at times look very cinematic. Like the final shot of the film is almost like a Bruckheimer shot. Uh, it was filmed in such a way that it does feel like everything's in close up. I mean, every time you see a character, they're always like this close, which is kind of distracting. Whenever there's action, like shootouts or chasing or whatever, it's this hellacious, shaky cam. So some of the cinematography I did have a problem with. It did look good. I thought it looked decent for the budget, uh, which I believe the budget was 3 million. Excuse me. But yeah, the story is nothing we haven't seen. It's essentially your Texas Chainsaw Massacre setup. Group of people driving through the country. They end up at the clutches of this family who are cannibals. They torture, kill people. They're cannibals. But there is more to it. Uh, there is some kind of social commentary. Because our group of people, we have Yasmin, or Yaz, played by uh, Katrina Testa. She's pregnant. Not enough to show, so it's not like Inside where it's the eve of her due date. But she's pregnant. Her ex-boyfriend and two other guys, they're Muslim Arabs in France, and there's this second round election going on where this far right candidate has won the round and is gonna proceed, and is causing these riots. So they pull off this robbery. They're being chased. They go out into the country. They stop off at this inn, or hostel they even call it. And yeah, it's this neo-Nazi family that takes people in. Like, it's made up of actual blood relatives and other people they've just taken in somehow. But, so yeah, they're cannibals, but if they find someone that is pure to them, they'll try to recruit them. And with our lead, they see that. They want the patriarch, who was a Nazi in World War II, which I do want to bring him up because he was very convincing. The name is Von Geisler, played by Jean-Pierre Joris. He had just the look and the presence of just this, not just an elderly German, but just like this former Nazi. He did very well. He had this very creepy, intimidating presence for a very old guy. And that's the movie. They you know, they kill all but the lead, and then she has to escape. It's your typical Chainsaw Massacre type fare. And that's basically it. It does have all these little sub things going on. Like, there's constantly something. It hints that there might be some kind of supernatural element. Before I get into spoilers, think The Descent, something like The Descent, but they never really go anywhere with it. Um, it is slowly introducing all these elements. Like, okay, it's not just that they're these family of killers. They're also neo Nazis, or they are neo Nazis, but he was a former one. But they're also cannibals. Now they want to marry her into the family. I mean, it's decent, and actually, the insert comes with this poster, which kind of makes it look like subconscious cruelty. But you look at any poster like this, or the one with the guy hanging upside down with the hooks through his feet, it looks just like a typical torture porn poster from 2005, 6, 7. And that's kind of what this felt like. It felt like your typical kind of almost Lionsgate, which Lionsgate did put this out, or at least they distributed it. I don't know. it felt like your typical Lionsgate movie, but maybe with a little bit of a martyr's edge to it. And yeah, she does have like cut hair by the end of the films. She does get brutalized, not as much as martyrs, but and she is a strong female protagonist. I mean, she does go through some shit. She does have kind of a weird, stiff performance as the movie goes on. Like, every progression that she gets through of making it through another round of killing off these family members, she gets more, like, kind of just stiff and jerky. And I don't know if it's to look traumatized or what. I get what they're going for. They're trying to flee from this fascist, conservative, but fascist, as people like to call them. I don't, but fascists flee from them for a better life, and they end up in the clutches of real fascists or people with real fascist beliefs. So I get, where they're going with it. One major complaint is, and there's not a lot of it, but the CGI. Yes, this is a gory movie. I mean, there's a scene where a guy tries to hide in like a steam boiler, and one of the members finds him and just turns the steam on, and we just see him just kind of melt. That was done practical effects, or at least a lot of it was. That's really the only torture scene, along with the bolt cutters on the Achilles tendon. Other than that, it's just, I mean, there is like Tarantino amounts of blood when someone gets shot. Uh, it does have CGI, but like there's a scene where someone falls on like a table saw, and the CGI is just insane. Like, he falls on, even the head is CGI, the blood going everywhere is CGI. I get it's a lower budget movie in 2007, but at least they did go with some practical effects. I'm not going to let the few CGI scenes ruin it, like I know a lot of people will, but the CGI was very distracting. It was as distracting as just the crazy shaky cam, which whenever a character's running, or there's a shootout, or someone's driving, it's this crazy shaky cam. It does have a lot of the horror movie cliches. I mean, even the false help. So she escapes, flags down a car, but it's a family member, so she gets brought back. Some of the more intense scenes were like, there's no still of it, but where it shows the two of our characters, they're trying to escape to. It's kind of in the beginning of when they realize what's going on, because the four break up into two groups: the two guys and then the couple. The two guys get there first, and yeah, it is like Hostel. They get there, the female members have sex with them, but then they realize what's going on. They try to flee. They're chased down the road. They go off this cliff, which that looked intense. And then they try to escape. They end up in this cave or this mine, and they find this little narrow hole in the cavern wall that they try to crawl through. And I wouldn't say it's as intense as Blair Witch 2016. The crawling, like the claustrophobic crawling scene. Only good thing about Blair Witch 2016. But, I'm only claustrophobic if it's that tight, and if like water or like caves are involved, like caving in or unable to like back yourself out. So I thought that scene was intense. It does kind of have a deeper or heavier kind of psychological or emotional horror. Like, it is kind of depressing. I would put this up there with Martyrs as just like a bummer, or just a really kind of depressing kind of movie, because this character of Eva, played by Maud Forget. She's kind of this perpetual youth. She's always dressed like a a, a little girl. She's very shy, quiet. She takes a liking to our lead, and as she's cutting her hair, which is a good scene. I mean, it does have this very dramatic moment, music. Yasmin's just sitting there watching herself. This Eva girl's just cutting her hair, telling the story of how she ended up with this family, which is she was a young girl taken in by this family, which means her family was probably killed. And they told her if she obeys, her parents will come back for her. So that's why she continues to obey. She still has this childlike naivete where she actually thinks her parents will come back for her, which is really depressing when you think about it. But the patriarch has tried having kids with her, and she hints that, well, okay, spoilers, because it tries to play it up like twists, but I think some of these elements I think there's too much going on as far as what she talked with trying to have kids, the whole thing that reminded me of The Descent, them being Nazis and cannibals. It just keeps adding all these layers, but it doesn't really go. Really, only the cannibalism and the neo-Nazism are really the only ones that really just kind of go anywhere. But, I mean, it is well made, despite its technical flaws, like always being in close-up, which is kind of distracting, or kind of I don't want to say confusing, but it is kind of hard to tell what's going on sometimes, because it is very dark. The lighting isn't very strong, because they do try to have that sort of Saw color filter throughout the film, which really only works when they're outside and it's just that harsh blue. But almost like constant close-ups, how dark it is in the shaky cam. Those are the technical flaws. Yeah, some heavy CGI in some scenes, but obviously, if you like Hostel or Saw, you're probably gonna like it. If you liked Martyrs or High Tension or any movie with like the Chainsaw Massacre type setup, then sure, you'll probably like it. But just know it's part of the French extremity movement, which means it's probably not going to be more extreme than Inside, Martyrs, or High Tension. You're not going to get August Underground, Stuff 102, Serbian film. It's not going to go to those lengths at all. But I did like it for what it was. And yes, before anyone says anything, because I know they like to on like my Murder Set Pieces review and any other one, yes, this is the unrated director's cut. So don't be like, well, if you see the unrated, then you'll know how extreme it is. No, this is unrated, so spoilers now. So, when the two guys were crawling through the thing, and one had a camcorder as a light, it kind of looks like there's like these creatures, kind of like The Descent, but more humanoid, through the night vision lens, kind of crawling after him. And then when he gets out of it, it looks like there's several kind of coming towards him. That's all we get of that for quite a while, that there might be some supernatural element or creatures out in the mines. But then when she's giving her haircut, because they want to marry Yasmin off to the sort of the good son, who kind of looks like Captain Vidal from Pan's Labyrinth. They want to marry her off to him because she's pregnant and can carry on, their blood that way. Which it doesn't really bring up. Like I was kind of wondering what would happen if the actual Nazi found out that they were Muslim and Arabs, just to see if that would throw a wrench in his divine plan or anything. I was kind of waiting because there is a scene earlier on when one of the guys says he doesn't want to eat pork because of his religion. They ask if he's Jewish. He says, no, I'm Muslim. But I was wondering if that was going to make a play with, the head of the family. But he still sees her as, pure enough for the family. And then that's when the fight begins. But as she's cutting her hair, which was a really well done scene, especially with the music and how it just holds on her, she says how the head of the family has had kids with her. Eva, the one that has the mind of a young child, waiting for her parents to come back. But they all came out not normal. And he wanted to get rid of them. But her and one of the helpers, Hans, who's just kind of like this big fat guy that just kind of chops the bodies up, gets rid of the waste, always wears like a apron. I don't really think has any lines, or very few. They feed the kids. They throw shit down like that tunnel they were crawling in, and she tries to go visit them. So that's what they are. They're just like deformed kids, I guess. And it did do this one cool thing where, so then she tries to fight back and, ends up in a shootout where the head of the family gets shot. She runs, and then there's a chase down into the mines with, the supposed husband and his brother, who's like this big, brutal guy. He's the one that lands on the table saw. And when he punches and kicks her in the face, there's impact. I mean, it's how effective it is. It looks like it fucking hurts. But she's able to fight back against them. Which, I mean, she uses herself as bait, like when she's leaning on the axe, so when he's close enough, she can get him. Like, even when she's beaten and bloodied, she is able to wait for the right moment. She doesn't just run at him screaming, then fuck up. But it shows the kids down in the mines, like, eating on where they keep some of the bodies, even eating on the guy that landed on the table saw. But we only see the back of their heads. I thought it kept it interesting not seeing their face. Kind of, like, imagine if in Hills Have Eyes, which this also kind of reminded me of, if the scene on Mr. Will You Play With Us, if it just showed her from behind. It's like, okay, we know they're deformed. It's kind of eerie, not knowing exactly how. But we get the idea that they're cannibalistic, almost feral kids. And then, of course, she helps out, like the kid for the Chainsaw Massacre remake. She shoots the supposed husband. And I mean, when someone gets shot, it's like Tarantino showering blood. And yeah, it was CGI when she blows his head off. But the shots in the mines were very well done. It was one of the few wide shots, and also one of the most sophisticated mines I've ever seen. Big, open, like square cement walls, fluorescent lights. It does do the saw lighting, like poof, poof, poof. But like when she gets out of the elevator down to the mine, is this great big wide shot. I thought it was beautiful, especially having like almost a whole movie of close-ups. So 2 family members get killed down there via table saw. The other one gets his head blown off by Eva. 2 other women just start shooting at her nonstop till she shoots like a propane tank, blows them up. One's hanging on to life. She leaves her. The other one survives, when she pins down in the mud, bites her throat out, which is when we get that scene. She tries to get Eva to leave with her, but she says, no, I have to take care of my kids, so she stays. And again, I thought she was the best actress of the whole movie. And I kind of get what they're going with the whole, like, how she just kind of walks and stumbles like this. Like she's in pain, traumatized, scared. But it does get more like over the top with every advancement she makes. And then she just drives away. Hears on the radio that conservative candidate won the second round of elections and is now proceeding to being the French president. And then it ends with her pulling up to a police blockade, and she just gets out and surrenders. But it's got this epic, like, Bruckheimer look to it. Like, shot from behind the cops, where they're, like, in silhouette because of the sunlight. But it has, like, this very, like, mid-level shot out in the country where it's just barren fields. You just see the road going way off in the distance. It had this very epic and cinematic look to it. But that's Frontiers. I guess it's as extreme as I should have expected. I mean, being after dark, and I figured part of the French extremity movement, it probably wasn't going to be much more extreme than Martyrs and Inside. I don't want to say it was gorier than Inside. Inside was far bloodier and, a bloodier, more violent movie, sure. But this just kind of felt like if you take Chainsaw Massacre, I guess Hostel, and just that sort of level of French extremity. And more of the scariest scene was probably crawling through that really tight-ass tunnel. But it really is sort of the emotional, psychological weight of some of the scenes that makes it either scarier or more depressing, like Eva giving her backstory and really thinking about it. I mean, it was well made. I feel like it might have had too many eggs for one basket and not really having a completed avenue for each one to go. Like, it really... them being a cannibalistic family, you can probably already assume. But then having the twist that they're these neo-Nazis to try to create a pure race just within themselves with grandiose ideas. I mean, that would have been enough just to give it its own layer, its own flavor. But it still tries to add more, like, oh, but there's these feral creature kids, but we're going to explain that later, and then not do anything with it. And I don't know, I thought it was well made for what it was. And despite its technical flaws, like I said, shaky cam, constant close-ups, some of the lighting, the color filters worked in some scenes, but other scenes it was really dark. But yeah, that is the French film from 2007. And like I said, looking at this poster, or the one where the guy's hanging upside down with the hooks through his feet, which, like the Chainsaw Massacre remake, it shows someone trying to lift him, can't do it, so he just falls, and the hooks, try to pull through. But yeah, probably not more extreme than other torture porn films of the time, or French extremity films of the time. But I liked it. Yeah, it was fine. So that's 2007's Frontiers. Frontiers. See, again, that's how obnoxious it looks when people use them in comments for no reason. So yeah, I have some more extreme films to get to. A few more I'm waiting on. It's going to take a while, but stay tuned for those, and thank you for watching.